Hi, I'm Nicholas Lodge and would like to introduce you to my Katy Sue Designs Flower Pro Ultimate Filler Flower Mold. So this innovative mold has multiple molds and cavities and veiners to use for filler style flowers. In this presentation, I'm going to concentrate on using the two blossoms here. I'm going to be showing you a forget-me-not and then talk about larger forget-me-nots and then other fantasy blossoms and cherry blossoms using this part. I would take a 30 gauge wire. I would use some quarter width floral tape, which has just been cut with a tape cutter or a pair of scissors into 1/4 width. And what you would do is you just would tape down a 30 gauge wire. This could be green or white wire here, but I'm using light green tape. So you just would tape down the wire all the way down. And then once you've got that, you would then cut this into half and then each half into 3. So what you're creating is 6 shorter little wires. So these are 6 30 gauge covered wires. We then would take usually 3 of these wires at a time, and you're going to make a little tiny hook on the end of those. So literally I'm going to take my tweezers about 1 centimeter down, about 1/2 inch down. The end of the wire is just visible there, and you're almost going to make as small a hook as you can make on the ends of the wires. So these will be the little wires we need for the forget-me-not buds and forget-me-not flowers. So I'm going to do the classic forget-me-not, which is obviously a blue flower. I'm actually using here Renshaw blue flower paste, flower modeling paste, or in the United States we have gum paste in the same color. So I'm just using this straight out of the pack. This is a perfect forget-me-not blue. On my size guide here, I'm going to use a number 3 size ball of paste. So you'd have 1/3 below, 2/3 above. I'm just going to condition this, so I'm just going to touch my finger on a little bit of vegetable fat or shortening. Just to condition this, and I'm going to roll this into a little sausage, a slight sausage shape like this, and I'm going to then just dust that with a little cornstarch, and I'm going to put this into my cavity. So I'm going to put this into the cavity like this, and I'm going to use my little companion tool. So this comes with the mold, so using the round ball tool, then I'm just going to slightly press that in just to impact that in a little bit. I'm then going to take my hooked wire. So with my hooked wire, I will take a little egg white. So I'm going to just put a little bit of egg white onto my brush here. And I'm going to just put the egg white brush in here. And then taking the actual little hooked wire, you're going to just push this into the bud. So here you're going to now just flex the mold, turn it, flex it, turn it, flex it. So you just do this 3 or 4 times. So this means when you take this out of the mold, this will come out of the mold. So you see how you have a little 5-petaled bud. And then all we're going to do here is then just use your thumb and finger with a little cornstarch, just mold that literally down so it just tapers down slightly. So these will be how you would make your little buds of your forget-me-nots. So for making the forget-me-not flower, I'm going to use some yellow flower modeling paste or gum paste. So you're literally just going to take a little ball of paste that will actually physically just fit through the number 1 hole. So you see this little ball of yellow paste just fits through the number 1 hole, okay? So I'm going to take my needle tool, which is on the end of my companion tool. I'm just going to lift up this little ball, and I'm going to place this little ball into this cavity here. Just remove this like that. So that just sits into the center of the forget-me-not. Now I'm going to take a number 5 size piece of paste. So again, you measure this on your size guide. So 1/3 below, 2/3 above is going to be on the size guide. And I'm just going to make this into a little cone here. This is about 7-8 millimeters long, and you're just going to flatten the top of this. You're going to make almost like the top of a golf tee. So you see how you have this little flat top piece. Now I'm going to use the needle part of the tool here. I'm going to put just a little bit of egg white on there, and I'm just going to touch the egg white onto there. So I'm just putting a little tiny spot of egg white, and I will just wipe that with my wet towel. And then I'm going to take my blue paste. So what this means, it makes sure that the yellow actually sticks to the blue. Take your blue paste and you position this into the mold like this. And then I'm going to start off first of all with my Dresden tool. And I'm just going to sort of just pull the paste just a little bit towards the edges here. So just pull this with your Dresden tool like this. And then I will finish this off with my little ball tool. So my little ball tool will then give you a smoother back. So you're just gonna pull your paste to your back area here. Okay, and then once you get to this point, we're going to just flex the mold, and this will come out. So this will give you a little forget-me-not. You see how you have the perfect little center and all the design onto here. And then taking my little mini pad here, I'm going to use my small balling tool here, and I'm just going to cup the petals. So you're just going to cup them. So you see how I'm just rocking backwards and forwards like this on the 5 petals. 4, 5. And this will give you a little forget-me-not. We're then going to take the veining tool, the needle tool end, and you're actually going to make a little hole into the middle here, like this. And then with your hooked wire here, we're going to put a little bit of egg white onto the hook. So a little bit of egg white goes onto the hook here. And then this is going to then be threaded down through the middle of the center. This is also why you need to have these hooks very small, because obviously when you push this through the center, this hook, if it was too big, isn't going to go in there. And you just pull that through until that just sits in the middle of the flower. Okay, like so. And then just using a little, you're just going to just taper the back of this flower, and again just going to just trim off any excess paste you have here, which I've done on several of the other flowers, because you need to have a little bit of a hat to be able to pull this out of the mold easily. And this is how we would make the little forget-me-nots, and then the forget-me-nots would just go into your little straw here, like so. And then you can also use this same technique to make the larger forget-me-nots. So if you were making the bigger size forget-me-nots, which if you were doing a larger scale cake, you could do these. These were done exactly the same way. The only difference is when you make the larger forget-me-not, instead of using number 1 small, I use number 2 small, and instead of using number 5, I use number 6 for the actual flower. So you just go up 1 size for the bigger size forget-me-not. So once you've made your forget-me-not flowers, you've made your forget-me-not buds, we generally would leave these to dry for about 90 minutes to 2 hours, and then we'll be ready to move on to the assembly and coloring. So now we're going to move on to the assembly. So once the flowers and buds have dried, we're going to start off with 1/4 width floral tape. You can have any number of buds and any number of flowers. So generally speaking, I wouldn't do them all the same. I'm going to show you here 5 buds and 4 flowers, but you could have 3 buds and 5 flowers. I mean, you could do any combination. So using 1/4 width tape, we're just going to just start, and then taking the floral tape, and you're just going to bend the bud slightly. And so you see how your buds will just come to the left and to the right. So this is to the right, now to the left. You have the stems pretty much right at the bottom. There's not really hardly any of the existing stems shown. Just going to add the wires here. Then we're going to put in the flowers. You're going to put in the flowers again to the right and to the left. And when you put the second flower in, so this is almost identical to the way I do the Lily of the Valley. When we put our second flower in position, so whatever number or combination of flowers, it doesn't matter, but when you get the second flower into place, then what we do is you take a 24 gauge wire and you add a 24 gauge wire here. So what this will do, this will extend the main stem, because if you're going to be wiring this into a spray, this will then give you the additional length you need. You're just going to continue down with your little flowers here, putting in the forget-me-nots. And then this will be the last and final one. And I'm just coming out a little tiny bit with my wires here, and then just continue down the stem. Remember, you can, when you're doing flowers like this, as I showed on Lily of the Valley, once you get the basic flower assembly, you can just finish off this part with half-width tape. Because usually this part will be wired in amongst other flowers, so it's just at the end of it doesn't make it too bulky. That's why we use the 1/4 width tape. And then all you're going to do here is just when we make the forget-me-nots, you can then just bend the end of the stem either to the right or to the left, so they just have this sort of characteristic sort of shape. And these buds are dry, so I can obviously bend these, so you can see how you can make your forget-me-nots. So you could have these curving to the right, curving to the left. So this one has been partially dusted, which is going to be the next step. And you can see this one has got 5 buds and 3 flowers. So you can have any combination depending on how you're going to use those in a spray. So now we're going to move on to the coloring of the forget-me-not. So I'm going to show you sort of 2 slightly different coloring combinations. This is like a periwinkle color, and so I'm going to take some of the periwinkle. Periwinkle is obviously, again, a filler flower, and very popular. So we're going to use just a little bit of periwinkle blue, basically dusted pretty much all over the existing blue. You're going to come down on your buds here. So we're just going to do this as sort of like an over color on top of the base. So you have your periwinkle blue here. All right, so I've got sort of pretty much covered that all over. Then I'm going to use, sometimes I leave them just like that. Some varieties of forget-me-nots have like a little bit of purple, so I'm using some purple color here. So you can just add just a little touch of purple, just sort of here and there onto the edge of the little petal. Add in a little accent color. These are things that just make your flowers sort of pop. And then I'm going to take a little bit of green. This is just a soft prairie green color, and this is just going to be brushed just around the very base of the flower and around the base of the bud. So this will just, as I said, just give a little bit of green around that. Just before I talk about the calyx, so this one, as you can see, is just slightly different color. So there I actually used a marine blue, which as you can see is a little bit not quite as bright. So I used a marine blue as a base. And then what I've actually done on this one is I've used some pink. So rather than using the purple, I've just added some pink color. So it just gives you a slightly different tonal color. So like if you were using, let's say, pink roses, probably then I would use a little bit of pink just to help to balance the spray. And the next step would be to take your forget-me-nots, and we're going to just put the calyx on. And we're going to do the calyx using a food art pen. So we're going to take your food art pen, and all I'm going to do here is just going to just mark like 5 little lines onto the flower. And you can move your flowers out of the way if you need to when you do that. But you're just going to just mark little lines onto the flowers and onto the buds here to represent the little calyx on the forget-me-not. And so here you can see your forget-me-nots, and then the forget-me-nots will be steamed. So we will lightly steam those. That will also even up the dust as well when you add extra colors. So we're going to steam those, and that will be my forget-me-not. So now moving on to show you a little bit of using the larger blossom cavity and the larger bud sections here. First of all, start off with a 28 gauge wire. Now, if you were making cherry blossoms or apple blossoms, usually cherry blossoms I use brown, apple blossoms use green. So sometimes we use brown or we use green tape. But I have here some 1/4 width brown tape. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the floral tape and I'm going to go around 3 times around the wire. So just start the tape. Go 1, 2, 3, like this, then make a hook. So just fold that over to make a little hook on the end of this, and then 5 times 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to do this very much like I did the buds of the forget-me-not. So we're going to make this into a sausage shape. I'm going to put a little bit of cornstarch onto here. I'm going to push this into the mold, and this is going to pretty much fill the mold up level. Then we're going to take your little tiny ball tool here, just press that in just gently, and this just also makes a little cavity for the floral tape bud to sit into. Little egg white goes onto the floral tape bud here, and you're going to then just sort of push this in, hold it fairly close to the bottom so it goes in. Now on this one, you're just going to literally just mold that around with your fingers. I'm going to turn the mold over and let the bud come out, because we're actually filling this mold up completely. When we've used this on other buds, we've flexed the mold to push the paste around it, all right? But here you literally just remove that, and you can see how you're going to get a larger, and you just taper this down slightly. So this is a super quick way to make, for example, if you did this in red, this could be a geranium bud. You make this in white, it could be apple blossom, pink could be cherry blossoms, all right? You can also use this just for fantasy little blossoms as well. So that would be how you would make the smaller bud. So we have small, medium, large, and then extra large. So that's how I'm gauging the sizes here. So here we have the same technique, and I'm just going to show you an additional step on this. But for a general flower making, this is a wonderful addition to have this little mold to make it a quick way to make buds. So here you're going to take your sausage of paste, you're going to push this into this again will fill up the larger cavity. So this is going to give you a larger version of the bud. Just going to taper this down just slightly. Now on this one, I'm going to actually make this look like a bud that's just sort of starting to open. So how I do that is I take my scissors, and with my scissors, rather than using the scissors like we would cut, you'll use your scissors on the side. So you have here like five petals, so you're just going to cut one of the petals. So I think of that like cutting in the head, you see? So you're actually like cutting into one of the 5 petals, so think of now we've cut into the head. And then I'm going to miss an arm, and then I'm going to cut into the 2 legs. So you're just going to cut down here, and you're going to cut down here. So you see when you open this up, when I open it up like this, you can see how I've cut into the head and I've cut into the 2 legs, and I've left the 2 arms intact. So with my small pad, I'm going to use my little small balling tool here, and I'm just going to just sort of like thin out these petals. So I'm actually just going to use this to sort of thin this out. So you're going to create like little, almost like a little petal here. We'll also do this on the little head as well. So remember, this tool is part of comes with the mold. It's a wonderful little tool to use for all sorts of applications. A little bit of egg white just goes in the inside of the petals here, like so. And then we're just going to just close this up. And so you see, you're just going to close this up. So this represents like basically a half open cherry blossom bud, or a geranium bud, or apple blossom bud, or just a fantasy bud. So if you were going to make cherry blossoms, you just would take some fine stamens. This would also be the same for apple blossom. These are just fine, like a fine silk stamen. I've actually got 8 of those here. I'm just going to fold those around. And then I'm just going to make this literally about 1/4 of an inch, about 6 millimeters long, the stamens. And I would bring the wire, so I'm going to bring this is a 28 gauge wire, will come up the side here. And I'm just going to wrap this around. So you're just going to wrap this around like a piece of string. And you can just make sure that the stamens are sort of, as I said, about the same sort of length. Okay, so these are about 6-7 millimeters long, about 1/4 of an inch. And then just going to cut off this excess stamen thread. So what we have here is we have the stamens on the end of the wire. Now I would just take my 1/4 width floral tape, this is my brown floral tape here, and just going to just go with my brown floral tape. I would just cover down the wire. Then I just take my tweezers here, just going to just sort of fluff the stamens just a little bit. So here we're going to take your paste. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is going to use a number 6 size. Alright, it's going to use a number 6 size pink, but as I said, this would be like 6 size blue, whatever color you want to make the blossoms, or in this case cherry blossoms are white or various shades of pink. And then we're going to use just this time we're not going to of course put any yellow in the center. So you're just going to make this into, again, like a little, almost like a little golf tee, like a little mushroom shape. Put a little bit of cornstarch onto there. I'm going to press this into the mold. And again, we're just going to use your Dresden tool here, and just going to work your paste towards your edge of your petals. So just like we did before, I'm just using the Dresden tool here. And you can press this in with your cosmetic sponge or with your, I'm not going to worry about using the ball tool here because this is a lot smaller, but you see how you just fill this up. And when you take this out of there, so really basically you have your a pink forget-me-not. Now when you're doing, for example, cherry, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just use my Dresden tool now to just stretch out the petals. So you see how you're actually just going to stretch these out to create your petals like this with your Dresden tool. And this is going to give you those obviously nice thin petals for a cherry blossom. Follow out the center here. And then with your veining tool end, which is the thin end of this, or you can also use the needle tool end, you're just going to just press at the base of each petal. So you're going to get this sort of line at the bottom of each petal, 4, 5. And then you would take your little bit of egg white, going to put a little bit of egg white just around the base of the stamens. And then this is going to go through the middle of the flower. So you can just sort of pull this out, and you can just sort of open this out to give you your little cherry blossom. So now we're going to move on to the calyx of the cherry blossom. So this is the same little jasmine calyx cutter. It's an FMM cutter I used for the making the jasmine. And so we're just going to cut these out, and I'm going to use my little companion tool here on a little sponge with a hole. Just going to cut that out. Little egg white is going to go in the center, but this is the same calyx I would use, for example, for things like sweet peas. And then all you do is just going to just slide this up through the little hole here, like so. And then just using your little sponge, this will just come around the back of your flower, like so. So here you have your little calyx of your cherry. When you are making cherry, usually you put your cherry together in little groups. So like, for example, you could have like 2 buds. Here I'm going to just do a little group in here of actually a closed flower, an open flower, and then the buds. Using some half-width floral tape, I'm just going to make these in little groups. Now when cherry blossoms, the leaves are not on the tree. So sometimes you might have 1 or 2 little tiny, very small leaves. So if you wanted to make cherry leaves, you can actually make those in the same way that I showed making the leaves for the jasmine. And you can make little small green leaves in exactly the same way as the jasmine. So if you watch the lilac, bouvardia, and jasmine tutorial, you could add little tiny leaves. But instead, in the early part of the spring, the cherry, when it first blooms, doesn't actually have any leaves on the tree. So we're going to take some, this is a 22 gauge wire here. And then what I'm going to do there is I'm just going to take the 22 gauge wire. I'm going to put this where the 2 buds are here. Just going to start with my floral tape. I'm just going to come around, and normally when I do cherry, I want to make like the cherry bark, so I'm going to come down about 5 centimeters, going to go up, and usually I do this about 3 times, so you're actually doing like up, down, up, and then taking your scissors, you can actually then just texture the floral tape with your scissors, so this will then actually look like the sort of bark of the cherry. And then here I'm going to now take the larger group in, and then with the larger group in here, I'm just going to just sort of add that to the little branch there. But if you were going to put leaves in, you of course could add some leaves at this intersection here. I'm just going to just open these out. And then usually once you get this done, then again you're just going to come down, you're going to go up, you're going to come down, so you can do your 3 times here, and you can just continue making this as long as you want, depending on how big a spray of cherry you want to make. And then when you're, once you get to that point there, then you can add 2 extra 22 gauge wires if you want to just sort of like strengthen the stem. And of course you could also have like another little branch coming off from this direction as well. And so you would just tape this down. And usually like this part, because this would be going underneath other flowers or potentially into a straw into the cake, I'm just doing a single row of floral tape on here. But I would just go in with my texture with my scissors. So this will give me my cherry. And then you can just sort of give your cherry little branch its shape, okay? So, you know, that was all basically made with no cutters other than a little calyx cutter and just out of the mold. So next time we're just going to show you a little bit of coloring on this just to bring this to life. So now for the coloring on the cherry, I'm going to use some pink. This is a sort of pink called Cosmos color, but basically any of the pale pinks. And then you're just going to just brush this onto the bud. And this is a nice sort of soft pink, so just going to just brush this just on the top, about the top half of the bud. And then we'll also just brush that onto the, coming from the outside to the inside. I'm using a flat type of brush here and do this on the petals, and then you see how you just get this nice soft color. And then we're literally just going to take a little bit of the green, so this is just a soft green. We're going to go into the middle of the flower, so you're just going to just sort of pounce that into the center of the flower. So you're just going to just get a little bit of green into the middle. And then so you get just soft green into the center of the flower. And then we're just going to just add a little bit of soft green, just sort of around the base of the, where the calyx is. So you're just going to get a little bit of green here, just some soft green around the base. And then this will be how you would finish your cherry. And then just like with the forget-me-not, we would then steam this. So you're just going to just put a little bit, again, just using a tea kettle, clove steamer, or a sugarcraft steamer, just lightly steam it. And that will obviously, as I said, just give a nice natural lift to the cherry, and just obviously give you that nice color. So here you can see the cherry blossom, obviously very dainty little flower. We can make this with or without leaves, but this could be made in apple blossoms or other types of fruit blossoms like peach. And then we have the forget-me-nots here. And you can see this forget-me-not I've just steamed, and you see how it's shiny because obviously we just lightly steamed that. That will dissipate, so you can see that this one is more natural looking, so after 2 or 3 hours that would just disappear. So those were made, remember, using obviously the buds on the bellflower, and then obviously using the smaller and the larger forget-me-not blossom molds. Remember, there are multiple video tutorials which show obviously how to break down each of the flowers that are covered on here, because this mold makes between 20 and 30 different types of flowers and buds. So it's a wonderful mold, and I hope you will enjoy using this Flower Pro Ultimate Filler Flower mold. This has been Nicholas Lodge, and I look forward to seeing you again real soon.